There we are.
We're live.
Yes. All right. We'll see. We'll see if we have people join us, which would be. There we go. Hello. We'll wait just a couple of seconds to let people join, even
Let
though
everybody filter in.
I
Yeah.
know, even though we didn't give advance notice, which I apologize
Yeah.
for. I know. I know. I feel like I'm going to hold this up right here so people can
Oh,
see.
yes.
Yes, this is what we're doing. This is what we're talking about. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thanks for coming. Well, I mean, I'm just going to start and people can join
Great.
as we talk.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us today. I am Suraj Shamali and this is Tracy Clark-Fleury, and we have corresponded for many years.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if we ever met in person. I don't
No, we've
believe
never met
so.
in person. We've
No,
never even interacted
no,
virtually like
no,
this.
that's right.
So,
That's right.
yeah.
But we're here to talk about this wonderful book, which Tracy released 3 weeks ago.
hmm
And you are a journalist, an author. I think of you too as an advocate. Maybe you don't, but I do.
Yeah.
And you write about sex and reproductive rights and feminism. For people here who may be unfamiliar with the book, can you tell us a little bit about it just to get us launched?
Yes. Yeah. So, um, in the spring of 2022, I took a DNA test and I found my sister, who my mom placed for adoption at a home for unwed mothers in the 60s, nearly 20 years before I was born. And as soon as I found my sister, I started having all of these questions about our mom's past that she couldn't answer because she had died at that point 10 years earlier. And so I dove into the research to try to understand what had happened back in 1965
Mhm.
when she was sent away. I'd learned about her pregnancy as a teenager, but I'd learned only the vaguest sketch of her story. And so, in finding my sister, I set out to answer these questions, and I learned that my mom was pulled into this racist and sexist system that
Mhm.
separated moms and babies. I came to have an entirely different understanding of my mom's past, and I also started to draw connections to my own life and who I became as a result of her past. And so the book is really about uncovering that story at the same time that I'm coming together with my sister.
So I think that anyone hearing you or reading this book may automatically think, oh, there are secrets in my family. There are things
hmm
we haven't talked about. I know that's true in my family. I think it's true in all
hmm
families, you know. In your case, your mother actually told you this when you were 16, right?
Yes.
And as you say, she told you this just as you started taking birth control pills.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I went on birth control pills as a teenager, and at the time, I sold it to my mom as being for dermatological reasons. I didn't want to tell my mom that I was going on birth controls because I was planning on having sex with my then boyfriend. Um, but she definitely saw through my cover story. And I remember picking up my birth control prescription, and we were sitting in the car outside the drugstore, and she exploded. It was this sudden, "Are you having sex?" Just kind of screeching panic. And it was so in contrast to how she had talked about sex prior to that. Like,
Mhm.
I grew up in Berkeley. My parents are a couple of hippies, and
Very sex
sex had
positive.
very sex positive, always talked about in glowing, loving, almost spiritual terms. And so this was in total contrast to everything else that I'd heard. It was clear that it caused some sort of panic in her that I didn't understand at the time. But 2 weeks later, after that interaction, she sat me down at our kitchen table and she said, "I have something to tell you. It's serious." And then I watched the color drain from her
Mhm.
face. And she told me, when I was a teenager, I had sex and I got pregnant. My father sent me away to a home for unwed mothers, and I placed the baby a girl for adoption. Mm, and I'd been raised as an only child up until that point, and so it was this, and I'd actually, grown up begging for a sister, so it was this shocking revelation of not only did I have a sister who was
Mm,
out there somewhere, but that there was this very confusing context to the adoption, to
mhm,
all of it that I didn't understand at all.
right. And then she told you that she had been in an interracial relationship
Yeah.
in addition.
Yes. Yeah, she told me that, the father of her baby was Black, that he was Nigerian, that she met him in college. She
Mhm,
told me just the vaguest sketch of the story, but as it turns out, she told me just the right details for me to later then,
mhm,
even after she died, be able to figure out who he was, because
right.
as I came together with my sister, we set out to try to find out
Because she
who the
didn't know
father
that
was.
either, right?
She didn't know that either, and as was typical for this time when young women were sent away to these homes, he was never told about the pregnancy. And so, you can read the book and
Yes.
hear the story of how we found him and connected with him,
Mhm.
all these decades later.
You also have talked about and write about how differently white women and Black women were treated in this system. Can you talk about
Mhm.
that?
Yeah. Yeah, so as I dove into this research after finding my sister Kathy, I really quickly came to understand that our mom had been pulled into this racist and sexist system that was, um, designed to punish women's, premarital
Mhm.
sexuality and reroute them toward marriage. And
Right.
that the vast majority of the women who were sent away were white. And Black unwed mothers at the time were expected to raise their own babies, in part because of racist stereotypes
Mhm.
about Black women's hypersexuality, which
Right.
was seen as ruling out the possibility of redemption. These were supposedly systems of redemption where these young, mostly white
Mhm.
women would be hidden behind the walls of these homes. Their neighbors, their friends, their extended family would be told lies about where they were. So as soon as they started to show in their pregnancies, they were hidden away. And the idea was that they would stay there until they could give birth, and that they would then place their babies for adoption and pretend that it had never happened.
Mm.
And they were told that they would be able to move on and forget, which of course turned out to not be true at all. But these adoptions were coerced, they were forced,
Mhm.
and it was all in service of reinforcing marriage and the white nuclear family norm.
Right.
These women's babies were then adopted by, properly married couples, often who were struggling with infertility. So it was part of like reproducing this idea of the white nuclear
Mhm.
family. And then at the same time, Black unwed mothers, Black single mothers were, faced a host of consequences for raising their own
Right.
children, including harassment by welfare officials and sterilization. And, so Black and white unwed mothers were placed on a
Routed in
completely
different
different
paths.
path.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I've read your writing for years, and I'm wondering 2 things. One, how do you think your mother's revelation and your desire after her death to find your sister,
Mm.
maybe consciously or unconsciously shaped your work?
Yeah. I mean, it was clearly such a momentous event,
Mhm.
that I'm going on birth control as a teenager, that I'm sort of starting my partnered sexual life, and I'm also learning about the ways in which sex had very negatively impacted my mom. At that time, I didn't understand that she'd been
Mhm.
traumatized by being sent away, that
Right.
she had been traumatized by the adoption. That was something I only came to much later, in
Mhm.
recent years as I started diving into the research about this history. But I did understand even then in that first conversation that we had, that it had devastated her. She was very
Mhm.
clear that she thought about her first daughter every day of her life. And I could tell that she was haunted by this event, that she had a lot of shame about this event. And I also, of course, absorbed the fact that, this was being shared with me as a cautionary tale, right?
Right.
The context was, I went on birth control. Now she feels like she must share this
Right.
secret
Because
with
this
me
could
as a
happen to you.
warning.
Yes, as a
Exactly.
warning.
And I think that's, I saw in her panic in the car that day after picking up the birth control pills, um, I made the connection that she was worried about history repeating itself once
Mhm.
I found out about my sister and about the adoption. Um, and so I would say that as a young person, I really wanted to believe that things would be different for me, that I could pursue sex and desire, mm, without consequences.
Mhm.
And I wanted to believe that the world had changed, that I was different, that there was more available to me, which was true in many ways. But I think it had changed more than it actually had.
Mhm.
And so I launched into the world as a young woman who, especially, coming up in the 90s and the 2000s with these very individualized and kind of commercialized ideas of sexual
Mhm.
empowerment, kind of grasping for power in my
Mhm.
young sex life. And then also becoming a sex writer, like, as a
Yes.
journalist, reporting on sex in all sorts of ways, going kind of to the farthest reaches of our sexual culture, but also writing personal essays about my sex life on the internet.
And consequences.
Yeah,
I mean, you write a
yeah,
lot about consequences.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. And, I didn't I saw the parallel between my mom's past and my life as a young woman in my 20s. I I understood that my mom had been sent away in shame, and I had sort of oriented my career around shame, both like
Yes.
writing about sex worker rights, but also like confronting shame and publishing very, vulnerable, exposing personal essays on the
Mhm.
internet. I got that. I got the parallel, but I thought that it was like an ironic coincidence,
Yeah.
or that it was a testament to generational change, that there was more that was available to me than there was to her. But it was as I found my sister and I dove into this research, I came to see that there was more of a causal link, that in so many ways I was trying to escape shame. I was trying to write against shame.
Mhm.
And then in many ways I was kind of still stuck in it. It was
Yeah.
I think I'd inherited my mom's shame. Also, I had inherited the world that shamed her, that this world had not changed as much as I had wanted to
Yes.
believe.
Well, it's like, don't think about an elephant. Like, you really
Yeah.
can't,
Yeah.
whether you choose to or not.
Yeah.
And so I know that I was looking at, online, and you have subsequently talked to so many people, I think, whose parents went through this. Also, just I'm so happy because this history is being written about and excavated. Um, did you have that sense when you started this? Did you know that? Or have you come to be part of a larger kind of group of people and community who are saying, "Hey, we have to pay attention to what happened and why it's important."
Yeah. I mean, I had been very clueless to this history prior to jumping into the research after
Mhm.
finding my sister,
Mhm.
which is stunning to me in retrospect. Because of course, like I have written about
Right.
feminism and about sex and all these issues for all of my professional life. And I knew that my mom was sent away to a home for unwed
Yeah.
mothers, but I had never actually really tried to sit with those histories and understand what that meant. And I think
Mhm.
that that's it just so obviously is because of the pain associated with it, that
Mhm.
that she had so much pain around that she didn't really want to look at it. And so I didn't look at it either until I was kind of forced to. Mm, But it was stunning to me to sort of watch as all these books piled up on my desk, some of them written by feminist historians like
Mhm.
Ricky Solinger, who's just, to me, a total rock star in terms of the work she's been doing over the decades, and, mm, just to know that that work is there, it is available, those
Right.
resources exist, but I think many people are not aware of this history,
Mhm.
despite that, and so it was pretty stunning to stumble on this kind of secret history that is just, like,
Mhm.
it's right there under the
It's right there.
surface.
That's right.
It's right there, and then, I've certainly encountered now in publishing the book and in doing interviews, people reaching out to me and saying, "This happened to my mom," or, "I was adopted in this
Mhm.
era." Um, I mean, not to mention all the sort of DNA test secret, the way that
Right.
DNA tests are exposing family secrets of all kinds. It really does feel like anytime I mention this book to anyone, even just casually in
Mhm.
life, day to day, someone has people have a connection
Yes.
to this subject matter, whether it's the Homes for Unwed Mothers or just the family secrets element.
Right, and you had a good outcome, I think. Some families
Yeah.
really cannot cope with these revelations, and
Yeah.
I mean, the DNA testing is fascinating, just, like, at a remove, intellectually, it's fascinating,
Yeah.
but it can be really disruptive to people,
Oh, yeah.
and I think people are now realizing, in fact, not in a case like your mom's, but a lot of families discover that their children discover their fathers aren't their fathers. Like,
Yes.
this is extremely difficult information in the moment, especially I mean, in your case, your mother told you, and you found a sister who loves you,
Yeah.
but that's not necessarily always the outcome.
No, no, and I feel so lucky about how our reunion has transpired, because I think it is pretty unusual,
Mhm.
and I think, of course, because there are just these wells of pain around,
Right.
especially around adoption and around these secret histories,
Mhm.
but the only reason that I even took the DNA test was, I wanted to find my sister for so long,
Mhm.
and I had listed myself on an adoption registry. Um, I'd considered hiring a private detective, but I refrained because I didn't want to intrude on her life. And then it was just one day I was sitting with a friend, chatting, and she was telling me that she had taken a DNA test simply because her mom was interested in genealogy.
Mhm.
And she took the test not expecting anything really much to come of it, and came to find that her grandfather was not her biological
Grandfather.
grandfather. And that this whole, so this massive family secret was right there waiting to be
Mhm.
discovered. Um, she had to, I mean, it's just, as soon as one finds something like that, then you can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it. That's right.
And it's life changing.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, to me, that really communicated to me the possibility that I could find my sister this way. And
Right.
so I ordered a test right then and there.
So, it's interesting to me too that I think your mother didn't want to do that, and you waited until she had died to
Mhm.
pursue it. I've had a situation like that in my family too, and what was so interesting to me was that there was a generation of people in their 90s, all of whom knew the secret.
Yeah.
All of them knew it, but their sense of shame was so profound
Mhm.
collectively that
Mhm.
they just wouldn't talk about it, and in some ways, I'm sure out of respect for your mom, you just
Yeah.
waited, because
Yeah.
at that point, she wouldn't be hurt or
Yeah.
be implicated. Um
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really did feel like it was hers to pursue when she was
Mhm,
alive. I think as much as I wanted to find my sister, I took a back seat and let her lead. And, you know, by the time she died, consumer DNA testing hadn't emerged as a
mhm,
possibility for finding her. But I know, she listed herself on an adoption registry, but she'd
mhm,
refrained from trying to hire a private detective. And I think in part because of her sense of guilt and her sense
mhm.
that she wasn't entitled to her daughter.
Disrupt her life.
Yeah, she didn't want to disrupt her life. And so I kind of followed her lead. And it was really after she died that I had this renewed interest in finding her, and also had kind of felt freed to pursue finding her
Mm.
because, it felt like it was something that I could more so own. But I resisted it because I didn't want to go in search of my sister out of my own sense of grief over losing
Yes.
the mom that my sister never got to meet. So
Mhm.
it took some years to arrive at that place of being ready.
Mhm. Well, that's understandable. I think to your point about girls, because they were often just young girls, being told that they could have these babies, give them up, and wipe their slates clean, move
Yeah.
on with their lives, which is clearly not what happens. Um, when you think about that and you think about the sort of current political environment, so anti-abortion, so
Mm,
kind of fixated again, I think, on purity, as
yeah.
racial purity, sexual purity, like all the purities.
Yeah.
Um, are there any themes um, in this book, in your earlier work? Is there sort of a genealogy of ideas that
Mm,
connects between across them?
mm. Yeah, I mean, my first book, Want Me: A Sex Writer's Journey into the Heart of Desire, is a sexual coming of age memoir. And I see that book as really trying to reckon with the cultural impacts of
Mhm,
coming of age in the '90s and the 2000s. And so that book was really like part of a process of me reflecting on my own search for this notion of sexual empowerment. And um I mentioned even my mom's teenage pregnancy and the
mhm.
adoption, but only in passing. I didn't at that point understand it as being something that was truly formative to me,
Formative, yes.
Yeah, I really did see again, it felt like kind of poetic irony that, I wrote about it in this passage where I was talking about, um, how my mom would worry for me in my career as I was putting
Mhm,
myself out there on the internet and, getting messages from misogynistic trolls in response to
mhm,
personal essays I'd written and stuff that she was gravely concerned,
mhm,
about some of that negative attention. Um, and, I think I, as a young person writing online, was kind of brushed it off and thought that she was overly worried about
mhm,
these men and their messages. But of course, now I understand that she felt so connected to the ways that women could be punished for their sexuality in
mhm,
ways that she never recovered from for the rest
mhm,
of her life, right? So um yeah, but she was supportive nonetheless of, she felt that it
mhm.
was important that I was doing important work, and so she worried, but she was also very supportive at the same
Right.
time.
And so I don't wanna give away too much, but you and your sister have a lovely relationship,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
We do. We do. I mean, that's, it's this book goes to some pretty dark places,
Mhm,
especially as I'm really diving into understanding the depths of my mom's grief over
mhm,
losing her baby. But I think thankfully for the reader, that story is bookended by this coming together with my sister,
right.
that where there is a lot of healing that's happening,
Mhm,
for everybody involved. And I think for me, so much of this book is about trying to set the record straight on my mom's experience because she never came to really have an understanding of um, being sent away and the adoption as being part of this broader systemic
right.
story of control and punishment. She really carried um, a sense of guilt
Mhm,
and, I don't think ever really arrived at that more compassionate understanding of her own
right.
story. And so for me, a lot of what this book is doing um, is, it's setting the record straight
Mhm,
of showing how this was not an individual choice. I
right.
think that's how I'd understood it previously. I
Mhm,
thought that my mom had been in a tough predicament as a young, single, pregnant woman in the 60s, and that she made a difficult choice given those circumstances. But as I came to understand this history, I saw that it wasn't what I would consider a choice at
At
all.
all, right. Yeah,
Yeah, that
I
there
think
really
that's
was
how
no
it felt.
choice.
There was no
Yeah,
choice. Not if
there
sh
was no choice.
not if she wanted to stay part of her family, her community.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, so many of these women were threatened with estrangement. Sometimes the adoption papers were signed for them. There was brainwashing that was happening in these
Mhm.
homes. It and I mean the histories, the first person testimonies really speak to the fact that so many of these women were left traumatized by these
Right.
adoptions, that they struggled with PTSD and substance abuse issues for the rest of their lives, that
Mhm.
this was quite contrary to the lie of that you will move on and forget, that they were never able to move on. They were never able to forget, that they were haunted by it.
Right, and I think too, you talk about, um, another revelation that came out of a somewhat offhand comment that you made about mental institutions,
Yes.
and just the trauma was so profound, and, um, do you wanna I don't know if you wanna
Yes. Oh, yeah, 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 when I mean, again, this is just sort of the way I think oftentimes it happens with
Mm,
these kinds of family secrets, that you get little drips of information. So, I got the initial account of when I was a teenager, and she told me about being sent away and about the adoption, but it was years later that I was, like, watching an HGTV reality TV show
mhm,
where they were remaking a garden, and with my mom and my dad, and they'd remade this garden in a very like sterile and regimented way, and I found myself saying, it looks like a mental institution. Have either of you been to a mental institution? And it was one of those instances where I think there was a lot of like me knowing without knowing
mm,
about my mom's story. And in that moment she said, well, honey, actually. And I learned that in the wake of the adoption,
right,
she was committed to a mental institution in her grief. That was the extent of her devastation, which, of course, I'm a mother myself now. I can very much
mhm,
understand that being sent away, having your pregnancy treated as a secret, being told that you should be able to part with your baby and move on and forget and really go return to your normal life and pretend like it had never
never
happened.
happened. Yeah,
It's not surprising to me that this happened to many women, not just to my mom.
right, and also, I think in parallel about the Magdalene laundries in Ireland
Mhm,
happening, just
mhm.
this horribly, really carceral system
Yeah,
for young girls, um, which didn't happen the same way here, but was really punishing, you know?
yeah. Oh,
Um, so I will close by asking, well, first of all, if anybody has questions, please let us know. I'm going to hold this book up one more time because I also love the book. There it is. You have great pictures in here too.
yeah, there are lots of good pictures, yeah.
Um, but in closing, have you had any like surprising reader interactions, or is there anything you'd
Mm,
like to leave prospective readers with?
mm, yeah, I mean, I guess what's surprising to me, and I guess it's not really surprising because going into this, I understood how, 1.5 million women were sent away to these homes, it's estimated. And 3 million women in this time period placed their babies for adoption.
Hmm.
So, I technically was very aware of just how widespread this was and how many families now, all these decades later, are living with these family histories and family secrets. But it's still stunning to encounter people at events and
Hmm.
in my inbox talking about their connections to these stories, whether it's
Stories.
as adoptees
Hmm.
or as unwed
Siblings,
unwed
mothers.
mothers, yes, siblings, and also, I have to say, I've been really touched by connecting with people who are in my position, who are the babies that these women went on to have later on. because I think many of us have had similar experiences around growing up in the wake of that trauma, the
Yes.
loss of a baby, and, it's been really incredible to learn that I am not alone in my
Right.
experiences on that front.
Right. I mean, it is a wonderful book. Thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you
and th-
so much.
yes, and thank you for talking today. And thank you to everybody who's joined us. I hope you do read the book. And I'm terrible, but I do believe in finding out what the family secrets are. And I figure maybe more interesting than letting them lie.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Well,
it's
and it's
hard.
how else do we sort of move on? How do we heal unless
Yeah.
we actually shine a light on it? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I just think you can never really know your parents, but you can know them better when
Yeah,
with compassion, and you have so much compassion clearly for your mother. So,
yeah.
all right. Well, thank you.
Thank you
And
so
thank you
much.
everyone for joining us.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.